look at our leaders, when you ring them, their phones are picked by somebody called a PA, whose only claim to fame that he is rude beyond measure. They acquire things which they have not worked for. They want to be described as honorable even when they are horrible. These are the men that we have. And there is no shortage of such men and women in the African continent. They promise us things that they know they will never deliver. And we believe them.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel once again. My name is Dash Lifestyle. Kindly for watching me for the first time, remember to subscribe, like, share and also comment. So guys, in today's video, I want us to watch this video from our African professor. He is known as Professor P.Elo Lumumba. Our professor, he has come out and sent a tough warning message to all African and Caribbean puppet and corrupt leaders. So kindly guys, watch this tough warning from our African professor, then I'll be back with more comment.
The 55 countries that constitute the continent of Africa, why is it that we cannot feed ourselves? Why is it that we have no faith in our institutions? We have no faith in our hostels. Why is it that we have no faith in our education systems? Why is it that we have no faith in our abilities? Why is it? Where has the leadership been? Why is it that so many years, while politics becomes the toy that lulls us into a false sense of security, our economies are controlled by people from other civilizations? Why is it? These are uncomfortable questions which we must pose and confront and answer if the mother continent is to realize our potential. Why is it that the mother continent is ever so negatively attractive to other civilizations? You know, as I talk about leadership, and as I think about leadership, and I think about what leaders are enjoined to do, I think about this mother continent. And many times, I see how our men and women in positions of leadership are being treated by other civilizations. And I said, oh God, where are our leaders? When the world congregates under the G7, there are no African leaders there. The best they can do is to invite one or two. And beyond the photo opportunity, they are told to go away, and go away they do. When there is a meeting of the G20, it is the same thing. There is no African leader there. And when at the United Nations they have voted all our countries, France, the United States, China, Russia, can come and neutralize all our votes. And I say, where are the leaders in Africa? And as you observe African leadership today, they are summoned by different leaders in the world. If the Japanese do not summon them to Tokyo under UNCTAD, the Indians are summoning them to New Delhi. And if the Indians are not summoning them, the Turks are summoning them. And if the Turks are not summoning them, the Chinese are summoning them. In the next 2 weeks, they will have been summoned to the United States of America. Summoned, I use. Africans who are watching this scenario ask, where are our leaders? Which begs the question, who is a leader? Is leadership the occupation of office? Is leadership the occupation of the office of the president? Is it the occupation of the office of a senator or a member of parliament? Or the occupation of these high-sounding positions which gives us honorifics? Is that what leadership is? From where I sit, that is pseudo-leadership. From where I sit, leadership is about service. Leadership is about honor and privilege to serve. That is why I still understand the men of old, the men of wisdom who said, he who is greatest amongst you must be your servant. This is what Africa is asking for. And Africa has been asking this question since she regained her independence. You know, when one is talking about leadership in Africa, one must go into history and ask ourselves, what was leadership before we were rudely disrupted? We had our traditional rulers. How did they govern? For whose benefit did they govern? They are still there, the traditional rulers. How do they fit in the new dispensation? When we regained independence and adopted all these structures from the erstwhile colonizer, what did we expect to deliver? That great American Pan-Africanist John Hendricks Clark says that when Africans regained their independence, not a single one of them re-examined the style of leadership. All of them continued with a mimicry of the leadership that they inherited from the colonizer. And he then delivers this verdict: not a single African country will ever succeed by mimicry. And I want to submit to you that whether one agrees or disagrees with John Hendrik Clark, one must look at Africa in order to ask ourselves, what is the state of leadership in Africa? And permit me to run you across the continent of Africa, and you will see a continent that is not at ease. The continent is not at ease because the continent is suffering from a deficit of leadership. Look at Africa today. Tell me whether we are at ease in Niger. Tell me whether Mali is settled. Tell me whether there is quiet and calm in Chad. Tell me whether Guinea-Bissau is doing well. Tell me whether the Cameroons are stable. Tell me whether Central African Republic is good. Tell me whether Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Northern Mozambique, and all these countries where there is peace and quiet, whether the sons and daughters of this country, tell me whether even this great Nigeria is at ease. Tell me. The answer is, she is not. And I dare say that as long as Nigeria is not at ease, Africa will never be at ease. Why? When the British left their colonies, they created something that they called the Commonwealth of Nations, to which Nigeria belongs. In that Commonwealth of Nations, the head is the British monarch. When the Queen dies, the King becomes its head. It is headquartered in London. It is the Commonwealth of Independent and Free Nations. It is not. It is a post-colonial, neocolonial institution which continues to massage the ego of the erstwhile colonizer as we celebrate. Through such institutions, they continue to control and to manipulate us. And many of us, particularly those of us who have had the advantage of foreign education, we never want to talk ill of bodies such as the Commonwealth. I do. And it's not only the British who did it. The French did it under Francophonie in order to control their former colonies and to make sure that they remain within their sphere of influence. They created a body which is alive and well. In the former French colonies, it's even worse. They even print their currency. The Portuguese did it. So, in as much as African leaders have been trying to ensure that we change the circumstances of our people, there have been external attempts at torpedoing those efforts. And Africa and African leadership must be seen in those contexts. There are those in many African countries who have allowed themselves to be acolytes of the neocolonizers and to the detriment of the continent of Africa. So when we interrogate leadership, we must ask ourselves, how free are our leaders? How free are our politicians from external influence? But is that an excuse? No, it cannot be an excuse. Leaders in a multi-ethnic environment must also be different. You know, Nigeria, as Chinua rightly said, like all African countries, is an artificial entity. Chinua says in his book, The Trouble with Nigeria, that there is nothing comparable to how the European nations were created. There is no Nigerian, Chinua Achebe says, in the same way as there is a Danish or a Swedish or a Norwegian. Nigeria is a unique state with many states. The same is true of Kenya. The same is true of Ghana. Nigeria possibly has over 500 nations within her. Tanzania, 136. The Democratic Republic of Congo, 306. Kenya, 42. Uganda, 56. In order to be a leader in such countries, those who have the honor and privilege must be men and women who are prepared to ensure that they weld the bonds amongst those people. As Samora Moises Machel said, if the post-colonial African country is to succeed, the tribe must die. And the tribe must die because if the tribe does not die, then the new nation will never thrive. And I did not understand Samora Moises Machel to say that he should stop being a Yoruba. No. I did not understand him to say that he should stop being a thief or to stop being an Igbo or Hausa or a Fulani. No. Those are cultural mosaics which when put together make our nations beautiful and strong. But what do we do in most of Africa? We use those cultural differences to divide the people. We use those cultural differences to reinforce centrifugal forces and therefore threaten the very nation which we want to serve. I am telling all of us who are present here, and many of you who are present in this assembly who are honored and respected and claim to be leaders, that you have a duty to ensure that you are in front in order to serve and not to be served. But ladies and gentlemen, let us also ask ourselves about followership. You know, as a young student, and many of us who are young students, it was the culture when you are in your first year of studies that you must be a revolutionary. And a revolutionary in the style of Karl Marx. And therefore you would say, workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. All of us were revolutionaries. And we used to say then that the safety of the bourgeois demands that the proletariat be kept in the most profound ignorance. We were revolutionaries. Who is a leader? Is he a leader who allows meta-ignorance to reign supreme amongst the people he or she is leading? Is it the duty of a leader to ensure that he leads men and women who are enlightened? Men and women who can question what he or she is doing? I'm suggesting to us that true and sustainable leadership also requires that you have a followership that is enlightened, a followership that calls you to account, a followership that is going to make demands of you, a followership that when you say that you are going to improve the quality of their food, they do not believe that agriculture stops on that day, but they believe that agriculture must be intensified and the technology must be used. A followership which knows that when you say you are going to deliver heaven on earth, they know that that is merely an advertisement that you are incapable of delivering heaven on earth. A followership that knows that when you are promising to do things within 100 days, which ordinarily can only be done in 5 years, they know that you are a liar. A followership that is capable of discerning that when you speak things, there are many variables, and it is the duty of a leadership to ensure that such a leadership is indeed created. What do African leaders do? African leaders in many African countries have now assigned the question of education, educating their followers to NGOs and CBOs, which are financed by the Americans, which are financed by the Europeans, which are financed by other civilizations. How do you think, how do you imagine that the people of Denmark would have the interest of Nigeria at their heart? How are you satisfied that all those civic education activities that are being undertaken in Borno, in Maiduguri, or in Abeokuta, financed by USAID, are meant to be for the benefit of Nigeria? Because the last time I checked, the English used to say, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So today, when you look at most of Africa, we have a followership that is tuned from outside. It is not a followership that is tuned from inside. And you wonder why they behave the way they do. They behave the way they do because they are being tuned by other civilizations. 3 years ago, an old friend of mine, now gone to be with the Lord, was engaged in a conversation with me. And I was complaining about the leadership, and he told me, I hear you, young man. You're always complaining about leadership in Africa and other parts, but have you ever wondered about the followership? Says you are complaining about the windmill, but do you ever bother about the wind? Is it not the case that the windmill follows the wind? I'm suggesting to you that Africa will never realize our potential as long as the critical mass of our people are immersed in sorrow and want. I am suggesting to you that Africa is not going to grow as long as you who are in positions of leadership have perfected the art of appealing to the stomachs rather than the minds of the men and women that you lead. I'm suggesting to you that Africa is not going to realize our potential as long as we continue to conduct the politics of money and money bags, not the politics of ideas. I'm suggesting to you that Africa is never going to realize our potential as long as we are dividing our people along ethnic lines. I'm suggesting to you I'm suggesting to you that as long as you who are in positions of honor and privilege are in the business of dividing our people on the basis of religion, Africa is not going to realize our potential. I remember in 1982, I watched a movie about Mahatma Gandhi, and I remember that great man saying in one of the scenes in the movie that he remembers one day, when somebody who was more enlightened than the other preachers came, and he said that on that day, he saw that preacher reading from the Muslim Quran on to the Christian Bible, on to the Jewish Torah, on to the Hindu Gita, and on to incantation in African religion, as if it did not matter which book was being read as long as God was being worshipped. I look forward to the day when those of you who are in positions of leadership will be able to tell our people, wherever they are in Nigeria or Africa, that it is not for us to fight for God. If I have a God for whom I have to fight for, that is not a God. The God that I worship fights for me. And if we accept that that is the nature of God, that is omnipresent, omniscient, and he knows all, then we are going to unite our people. In other words, I'm saying that if we are going to have a followership that is going to change the continent of Africa, we have got to exorcise the ghost of ethnicity. We have got to exorcise the ghost of ignorance. We have got to exorcise the ghost of poverty. We have got to exorcise the ghost of narrow-mindedness. Fellow Africans, fellow Nigerians, it is still true that everything fails and falls on leadership. It is true that we men and women are in unique positions. Abu Bakr or Lusala, Saraki. If Africa wants to be at ease, Nigeria must be at ease. She is the largest economy in Africa. She has a population of over nearly 200 million people. One in every African is a Nigerian. She is represented in every sector. If you want the best engineers in the continent, they are Nigerians. If you want the best doctors, they are Nigerians. If you want good lawyers, they are Nigerians. If you want good people, they are Nigerians. But also, if you want Yahoo boys, they are Nigerians. Nigeria is a great country. A friend of mine once told me that if you go to any part of the world and you do not find a Nigeria, leave that place, because there is nothing to do there. Nigerians are present everywhere in the world, everywhere in Africa, and Nigeria, I'm told, is a $500 billion economy. Never, ever be proud of that, Nigerians. This is an economy that should at least be a $4 trillion GDP economy. Whenever you reach that level, then I'll say Nigeria is doing the right thing. All the ingredients are there. The question is, why is it that she is not realizing our potential? When we talk about leadership, we must ask ourselves, why is it that despite the best intention of the best of us, we do not get and gain what we desire? You know, I said that when you look at Africa and leadership, you must go back to history. And you ask yourself what the leadership is. And we have looked at Africa that is not at ease. But yet there is a sense in which Africa has had and continues to have men and women of renown. I remember, courtesy of history, when Africa was struggling for our independence. I can remember that great meeting in Manchester in the United States of America, the Pan-African meeting. And history tells me that Nigeria was there. Chief of Bafemi Awolowo was there in 1945. And I can still remember his words spoken about African unity. I remember that Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah was there. And then we remember how they came back to the continent to lead the continent. And I am still wondering how in those days, without the benefit of the internet, without the benefit of all means of communication that we now have today, that those men and women were able to govern and to galvanize the attention of the continent of Africa for the sake of Africa. They were there throughout. But even prior to that, I can still remember another great African talking about leading Africa out of our state, the great South African Pixley Kaisa Kaseme in 1906 in Columbia in the United States of America, say, Africa must be regenerated. When all these things happened, there were leaders in Africa at that time, and their mandate was cut out for them. Their mandate was to ensure that we broke the colonial chains, and we did. I remember, and many of you here, courtesy of history, will remember many Africans at that time, and if I name them, you will agree with me that they were leaders.
So guys, I hope you have watched that video from our African professor, Professor P.L.O. Lumumba. Our professor, he has come out and highlight some of the problems and the challenges that we as black people, we are facing in our African country and our black countries in the Caribbean. He has come out and mentioned how our leaders, they are not working according to the will of the people, because majority of our country, it is behind because of our corrupt and puppet leaders, because these corrupt and puppet leaders, they are the ones who are making these Western countries to call our country a third world country, to show the bad image of our country, how our country it is being, people are being dying with hunger, how there is so much struggle in our country. It is because of our leaders who they are not working according to the will of the people. It has come to a point whereby we as African, we as black people, we need to start our revolution, because this revolution that we are about to start, it is going to affect, it is going to remove those leaders who they have stayed in power for more than 10, for more than 20 years, but they have not done anything. We are still having our leaders who they are sellout leaders up to date. We are seeing them shaking hands with the Western, with the colonizers, with the Western people. We want those leaders to be, to step down, because right now we want a young leaders, because we have seen some of our young leaders, what they are capable of doing. You can see a good example is from Ibrahim Traore. Ibrahim Traore is the president of Burkina Faso, and Ibrahim Traore is our African youngest leaders. But right now, everyone knows Ibrahim Traore because of the good things that he's doing to his country, because Ibrahim Traore is that one of our African leaders that he has managed to show these other African leaders that we can still do it without depending to the Western countries. Ibrahim Traore, he wants our African and black countries and our Caribbean leaders to follow his footsteps, because Ibrahim Traore right now, I know, is being targeted, but being targeted, he has shown us that these people, he has exposed also the Western people, because the Western people, they don't want our leaders to wake up. They don't want our leaders to exactly work according to the will of us black people. So what these Western people, they want is our leaders to become a puppet. It is our leaders to become a sellout leaders so that they can still enjoy our resources from here in Africa, because these people that the ones who are taking our resources from here in Africa, they're creating more jobs to their children with our resources. So they want always to be like that. When our African leaders, he wants to stop that, these Western people, they usually come and try to assassinate these leaders who is cutting all our resources going out of our country. So this is to tell you that our professor, he wants our African leaders to wake up. We need to revolutionize our African country. He has talked about the schools. Why is it we are still having a few schools in our country? We need to build more schools. We need to build more hospitals. This is some of the things that it is affecting us black people, because when these leaders, they are coming to power, they usually promise us a lot of things. Yeah, they usually say we will build more schools, we will build more hospitals, we will create more jobs. But when these people that are getting into power, they usually forgot about that and they are becoming Western puppet. So the biggest problem that we are having in our African and black countries in the Caribbean, it is because of our leaders becoming puppets, selling out our resources from here in Africa. And that's why our professor, he wants these leaders to wake up. And for me, I can tell you that we black people, we need to start removing these leaders who they are still asleep. We have leaders at the age of 90, they are still into power. You can imagine. We have leaders at the age of 80, they are still African presidents. They are still in the leadership. These are some of the leaders that we need to remove, because these leaders, they have become greedy. How comes you are at the age of 80, at the age of 90, you are still a leader? You need to step out and give other young leaders to come into power and see what they are doing, because we as African and black people, we are tired of our old leaders. You can see how the Western people they are doing. You can't see the Western people they are having a leader with Western countries, which they are having a leaders who they have stayed in power with at the age of 90, with at the age of 80. No, you have not seen that. But here in Africa, we have these greedy leaders who they want to die in power. Those are the leaders that we as African people, we need to remove so that we can make our black countries, our African country better. And because of the revolution that it is going on, that it has started here in Africa, I'm kindly urging a support to all black people, the black people in the diaspora, the black Americans, the Afro-Caribbeans, to join hands and support Africa revolution. We want to see African revolutionaries. We want to see African kicking out the Western countries. We want to see African are stopping their resources going out of their country. We as African also, we need to start to benefit with our resources. We need to see the resources that God gave us through our land, that we are helping ourselves with. So kindly guys, subscribe if you haven't, like this video, share, and also comment. Let's talk more on the comment section. See you. Bye bye guys.